Thank you, Joe. Thanks, everyone, for coming. It's good to see everyone here at this event again. It's growing, as most OpenStack events do. It's really cool. One of the things that I love about the OpenStack community is how global it is. And it's really cool to see these kinds of events happening all over the world. Since the last summit, we've had them in Germany and Hungary. We had the first one ever in Istanbul in June. About 500 people there in Turkey. We just had a couple. One was in India, one was in Taiwan, and I think there were around 1,700 attendees in Taipei. So, it's you guys are a part of something that is great to see happening here in Silicon Valley, but it's also happening all over the world, and it's much bigger than any of us or even this event today. To start off with, I actually have something that is a pretty exciting announcement for the foundation and for me personally. As many of you know, we started the OpenStack Foundation 3 years ago as a nonprofit that would be dedicated to the long-term care and management of the OpenStack project and the community around it. And we just received word that after a very long and intricate back and forth with the Internal Revenue Service, I don't know if any of you guys have ever had to go through it, but they're thorough. We are now recognized as a tax-exempt nonprofit. Yeah, and it's great because that's a recognition of what our community and our foundation is doing for the cloud computing industry as a whole. That's the only way you get that designation. And from a practical perspective, it's awesome because we're going to be able to have more resources to invest into the community over the long term. So very excited that we have achieved that. So to start with today, one of the things that we always talk about is how critical software is to every organization today. They have to make use of it, they have to build it, and that's what's driving so many of these technology shifts, whether it's cloud, whether it's containers, it's appification of the entire economy. And we talk about that as the driving force behind a lot of it. In OpenStack, especially in the last year, we've seen dozens and dozens of companies who've come out and talked about how they are using OpenStack to really capitalize on the opportunities that the software-defined economy brings to them. And these are some of the companies that spoke about their usage at our most recent OpenStack Summit in Vancouver. You can go to openstack.org. We have videos. Every video from all of our summits is posted there. And you can go hear straight from them. We've done a lot of summits, and we have had a lot of speakers, so there's tens of thousands of hours of video content up there. And it would take a lot of time and effort to get through all of that. So one of the things that I wanted to do to kick the day off is to sort of take a bunch of the knowledge, a bunch of the wisdom that these users have shared with the community and have shared with us as we've talked to them, and present 4 patterns that we've seen that have helped companies take the path to production with OpenStack. And when you look at some of the companies that are doing this now, these are companies of all sizes, deployments of all sizes, but there are some things that are in common across it. And just looking at some of the names up here that are using OpenStack in production, you have companies like FICO. They're part of, I think, 97% of the credit decisions that get made, and that's powered by OpenStack now. You have Walmart. They ran their 100% of their holiday traffic last year on top of OpenStack. You have PayPal. 100% of their front-end production traffic is running on OpenStack. So real usage happening with real companies at scale, big piece of our economy, and tools that we interact with every day. So how do they get there? 4 patterns to run through quickly. The first one, no matter what size they end up with, all of these companies that I've talked to that have had a successful OpenStack deployment have started with a very specific focus. And I think that this is really a critical pattern anytime that you're adopting a new technology. When a new technology comes out, it can be really exciting to think about the possibilities, but also there are always challenges with it. And everybody knows that the first version of a piece of software, the first version of a piece of hardware, it has glitches, and you have to work through those. These companies, what they did is they found specific users that within their organization that were going to benefit from the advantages that OpenStack could bring: agility, time to market, speed of development. And they worked with those users almost like VIP beta customers, internal customers. They talked to them about what do they need, what's working, how do we fix this so that it's really valuable for you. And then what you see is those internal customers turn into internal promoters. And all of a sudden, companies across, or users across the organization are really demanding that they have access to this infrastructure. One of the really interesting organizations that came and talked about this a couple of years ago was the NSA, the National Security Administration. And that's, you don't necessarily think of them kind of taking that small team startup approach inside of an organization like that, but they did, and they were very successful. I mentioned Walmart a little earlier. Walmart is a massive company. They have massive scale. This is a graph of their path to production with OpenStack. And you'll notice that obviously a lot of build-up, especially to this last holiday season. But back there in 2013, they were running select workloads in production on OpenStack already, but at a tenth of the scale of what they run now. They had users internally that wanted that agility, that wanted to be able to move faster, that wanted to be able to self-service their own infrastructure. And so that was where they started. They worked out the kinks there, and they moved on. So once you've found those critical early adopters who are going to be your promoters, who are going to help you tune the product, then you start thinking about how do I take this to larger scale. And that's when the team really comes into play. So the second pattern that we've seen is that companies who are successfully deploying OpenStack, they look for experience operating horizontal services. This isn't just about, can I take some kind of monolithic application and vertically scale it and tune it and make it perform. That's a very valuable skill. But OpenStack is a collection of services. Sometimes people call it a framework. And so you're going to have a number of different services. They're going to scale independently. They're going to have different failure modes. They're going to have different areas of optimization and configuration. And that's a skill set that's out there, but may not be something that you have on your team right now, or that you have a lot of experience with. This isn't just an app server, a database server, a storage system. And so finding someone with the experience of operating horizontal services, distributed services at scale is really important. And I think one of the really key things to remember with a cloud environment, when you get into elastic workloads and self-service, people are running, it's much more arbitrary about what's going to be running in your environment. You're not going to have as much insight and control over exactly what's on this machine. And so you need to have people that think almost like a service provider. And you can hire them. You may already employ them. But what a lot of successful users do is they work with some of the different organizations in the OpenStack ecosystem. You can go to the openstack.org/marketplace and find a variety of companies who provide different models. And you're going to hear about that through the next couple of days, but different models for delivering OpenStack. And it's really, really key to consider how you find that experience. Some of the users that we talk about that are running at huge scale, they have small teams internally, but they found really good experts in the community, really good experts in the ecosystem. So once you have found your early adopters and started to scale it, it's time to take it all the way across the organization. And that first step is really about creating the carrot and finding the people who want that carrot. But eventually, if you really want it to be something that takes hold everywhere, then you may need a little stick. And so this is when organizations start to think about what is their policy going to be for infrastructure. And people say cloud first, or I said cloud preferred here. The idea is really that at some point, you're going to have to put a stake in the ground and say, going forward, our preferred deployment model for new resources, for new applications, is on the cloud. And you may need to think about writing applications a little differently. You may need to think about provisioning resources on a different timeline. Those are all things that end up taking place. We had another user who spoke about this in Vancouver from TD Bank, Graham Peacock. And this was a quote from his session in Vancouver. He said, if they can't build it on cloud, they need to get my permission to obtain a physical server. which is pretty hard to get. This is TD Bank. They're a massive organization. They are in the financial services industry. They have lots of legacy workloads. But this is the strategy that they are really getting behind, and so they have the policies that are going to help them be successful there. And Graham is not just an administrator. He's not the BOFH who is just grumpy and doesn't want people to do things that he doesn't like. He's VP of engineering. But that's how important it is to their organization overall. It's strategic for them over the long term to change the way that they manage IT. And there are other things that they do in concert with this. It's not just about saying no. They have trained thousands of their developers on how to get the most out of cloud. Because when their developers understand the benefits, then they want to go to cloud. And this policy that Graham has put in place, it doesn't become a problem. It just kind of reinforces their path to production and their strategy for infrastructure overall. And the final pattern, which you could say this one should come first, but it's that you have to do cloud for a good reason. When I was here last year, I spoke, and how many of you were here last year, actually? Okay, so a lot of new people. That's good. So I had a slide that had a bunch of random things on there, like a jetpack and a lie detector and just all these random things. And the question is, what do they all have in common? And what they all had in common is they were things that the professor invented on Gilligan's Island instead of plugging 2 holes in a boat. And if you watch that series, he always had some amazing thing that he made, but there were still holes in the boat and they were still stuck on the island. And the point is that you have to do things for the right reason. You can't just go build a cloud, especially go build a private cloud for just because it's cool technology and you think you want to do it. And companies that have done that, a lot of times have run into trouble, and there are a lot of failed private cloud projects out there. But the companies that are really successful with it, they have good reasons. And there are a lot of good reasons, whether it's public cloud or private cloud, to go out and build your cloud strategy. And it can be things like cost cutting. It could be things like time to market and speeding up product development cycles. It could be about breaking down silos and getting rid of islands in your technology. But it's something that there are a lot of reasons, and you need to find it, make sure that it's very clear to your teams, to your executives, to the organization overall why you're doing this, and then all of those other patterns much easier to implement. A couple of examples here. One is a car company that they are one of the top auto manufacturers in the world. They collect data from all of their vehicles, from all of their dealerships, from social media. They have a big data analytics platform that analyzes all of this. And I think since they've rolled this out, they've collected multiple petabytes just from the sensors in their cars that's going into this environment. So it's something that is a really cool use case, and it allows them to have better insight into the experience of their drivers. But the other thing that's really key to it and why they implemented OpenStack is because they had an appliance, one of these big vertical systems that they were trying to do this process on, and it could not handle all the data that was coming in. They built an OpenStack environment, used some modern big data tools, and were able to run all of these jobs. And that new environment they built was 1/10 the cost of the old environment. That's a great reason. And we heard from another user, Tapjoy, in Paris. Similar thing. They were all public cloud user. They do tons of data science. They have 500 million monthly users to their mobile analytics platform. If you ever get an ad on your phone from a game or anything like that, there's a good chance that Tapjoy is involved in that somehow. They moved specific data science workloads from public cloud to private cloud, and they were able to get 5 to 10x the capacity for the same price. So if you are having trouble justifying cloud, if you're having trouble understanding why it makes sense, then these are a couple of examples of people who have found really good reasons. When you can say, we're going to save 10x, or we're going to get 5x the capacity, it suddenly becomes a much easier sell. So those are 4 patterns. These are all things that we hear from our users all the time. And like I said earlier, you can go hear a lot of this content directly from them on our website. We've got a bonus one here, which is use OpenStack to build a platform for innovation. And this, I think, is not something that that has necessarily happened everywhere in all of these use cases yet, but that I'm starting to hear people doing. And that's what I kind of wanted to touch on here for just a couple of minutes. All of these things that we're talking about, they get back to compute, storage, and networking. Processing data, storing data, moving data. And that's what OpenStack provides, is a framework for compute, storage, and networking. And it does that in this plug-in model with dozens of drivers across all of those different technology components. Whether you're talking about virtualization, whether you're talking about storage, there are commercial options, there are open source options, and it's really powerful to be able to plug all of those different technology components in and be able to take advantage of all of this technology. So that's a really key benefit that people find with OpenStack. What it points to, though, is really that underneath all of it, OpenStack operates as an integration engine. It's a layer that takes different kinds of hardware, different types of systems, integrates them into a unified platform that your developers and your users can access on top of it. And so to talk a little bit about that, I want to bring up my special guest. We're really fortunate to have a user here today. Help me welcome Amit Tank. So thanks for joining us today, Amit.
Hey, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Could you start out just by telling everybody a little bit about what you're doing with OpenStack?
Sure, yeah. So a little bit of prologue. There are traffic loads, and then there is NFL traffic load. There are load spikes, and then there is a load spike that results from Pacquiao-Mayweather pay-per-view event. So at DIRECTV, our team is chartered with this directive to bring some really tough but really interesting problems like auto-scaling, demand response, load spike scaling, some of these kind of problems. To solve these problems, how can we bring OpenStack in production and solve some of these business problems and also achieve other innovations that come along? So that's our charter.
Right, yeah. And so, we've talked a couple of times, and you've talked about the various environments that you have to integrate, and legacy and existing virtualization, and then where you want to get to be more agile and be able to handle those traffic spikes better. Can you talk a little bit about how you are putting the strategy together around all of those different scenarios?
Sure, great question. So I think it goes back to the slide that you showed earlier about you have these abilities this ability to work with different blocks of technology, and I'm sure that the business audience here can relate to this idea that if you're going to build a cloud technology, you're not going to be able to necessarily build it in vacuum. You have to take your existing workload, and you have to answer the question about how are you going to integrate it nicely with your existing infrastructure. And that's where I think OpenStack really shines. We see a lot of value proposition in terms of if you want to take it to the end productions level, there are stages that you'll probably end up having to travel, which is probably you'll start with something like CI/CD DevOps environment, which is more catering towards your internal development cycle. And as you said earlier, you build some brand ambassadors within your own organization. Take it to something like a partner integration environment, which is slightly more elevated form of involved form of environment where different third-party components are now integrated there. And from there on, the next leap is end-to-end test environment, which is pretty much going to be like mimicking your production environment if you can prove within your organization, your management, upper management, executive leadership, and your technology audience that it works nicely in end-to-end environment. It's pretty much then ready for production.
Okay. So Alex was introducing earlier today, and he was saying that we're going to talk a lot about other technologies and technologies that are on the horizon. How do you see OpenStack playing into your adoption of some of these emerging technologies like containers and container management frameworks? Sure,
very good question. So I think the answer to that question goes through the concept of being able to solve some of the business problems that we talked about earlier in a vendor-agnostic, multi-hypervisor, hybrid cloud format. So think of it as hypervisor is if you can have multiple hypervisors and you want to be able to have a cloud, OpenStack cloud, that can integrate with, say, a virtual F5, being able to, on the fly, create WIP and add things to the pool. OpenStack is probably the only game where it gives you this path to production to solve problems like your load times using containers. Down the line, let's say you have an amazing load balancer as a service product coming from a startup, and you want to integrate that in your environment. OpenStack is probably the only platform that allows you to pick and choose the best of the breed and make it work with your existing infrastructure. And we see that as our real way to basically bring all of these containers as well as other emerging technologies into our production, like our path to production.
Great. I love that phrase, path to production. Well, thank you for joining us. And Amit's going to be around today and is happy to talk to anyone who may have other questions. So thank you, Amit.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. May I make a small point?
Absolutely.
So I'm really fortunate. DIRECTV is now a proud member of AT&T family, and I work for my VP, my directors. They are amazing business leaders, and for any technologists out here, if they want to impact on how America consumes NFL video or how America consumes content, they should definitely consider DIRECTV as a great place to work and bring their innovations.
Always recruiting. Yes.
Thank you.
That's the OpenStack recruiting as a service project that we. So, Amit was talking about the path to production, and I want to wrap up with just the last few minutes that I have here, talking a little bit about how that fits into OpenStack. And I think that as you look at all of the technologies that are part of OpenStack, all of the technologies that are really exciting, that have a lot of potential that are emerging right now, there are a few ways to sort of, I think, kind of chart them out. And this is something that we started talking about a few months ago as we specifically looked at the OpenStack ecosystem of projects. I don't know how many of you follow it closely, but there are many, many OpenStack projects now. It started out as just a couple, and now there are dozens. And that can be confusing sometimes when you look at it. But it's sort of a right tool for the right job thing. And I think that most technology, you can kind of chart it on this quadrant of maturity and adoption. And the things that are not widely adopted and that are not very mature, those are the experiments. The things that are not very mature, really widely adopted, those are unicorns. And unicorns don't really exist. Even things that seem like they're overnight successes, like Uber or whatever, they've been around for years, and they have the hockey stick effect. You've got the top left corner here, which those are the mature but not very widely adopted technologies. That's the niche. That's the things that are important to people but don't necessarily really build out broadly across a platform. And then you have the things that are the winners that widely adopted, very mature, and go on to be really important pieces of the technology infrastructure. And so one of the things that we think in the OpenStack community, this reflects the way we build projects and kind of bring them into the community, is that experimentation really is something that leads to breakthroughs. And you get that's how you get into the winner's circle. So if you look around and you look back when we started OpenStack in 2010, there were some existing technologies that were really close to making that breakthrough. Virtualization was starting to become widely adopted, widely accepted as a technology. The OpenStack component that managed virtualization, Nova, was a super early experiment. I think it was 12,000 lines of code or something like that at the time. So very early on. But you move forward to where we are now, and you see 5 years later, virtualization extremely widely adopted, and OpenStack compute is also extremely widely adopted. I was looking at some of our user survey data recently, and we have over 1,000 deployments in our deployment database, our opt-in deployment database at the foundation now of OpenStack compute. And there are many others that are not tracked in that. But this is something where it's achieved that. If you expand this out, though, and you look at kind of OpenStack overall, what you'll see is that various projects are in various stages of adoption and advancement of the technology. And I think this is a really important concept to keep in mind as you look at OpenStack, or as you really look at any potential technologies. And you'll notice that the projects that are kind of the pieces that have become part of the core interoperability guidelines, those ones are all up at the top right. But there are companies who are running some of these other projects in production today. It doesn't mean that you can't use them. But I think this is an interesting way to chart it and important to think about. If you go up to the top right, It's going to be more stable, more well-tested. People have more experience running it. If you go down to the bottom left, you might still get a huge value out of it. Again, going back to pattern number 4, if you're doing it for the right reason, but you might have to put more effort into it. And I think that, if we think about today, what's happening is we see tons of experimentation happening. We see a lot of things happening down in that bottom quadrant with software-defined networking, with containers, with things like Kubernetes. Craig from Google is going to talk in just a few minutes. And all of that is awesome, tons of potential. But we have to really think about how do we adopt it, and as Amit said, how do we find the path to production for those technologies? I think that one of the things that we're starting to see some OpenStack deployments do is they go back to this, compute, storage, and networking. These are the pillars of everything, every application, every workload. They run on top of this. And OpenStack provides a framework that lets them tie that into existing systems, existing enterprise storage systems, existing identity systems, but also bring in those experiments in a way where they're able to adopt them and make use of them, sometimes faster than they would without OpenStack. And I think that's a huge value that OpenStack is starting to bring to people. When people start out an OpenStack deployment, a lot of times it looks like this. It's a set of physical machines with a bunch of hypervisors on it. But over time, they may need a workload that runs directly on top of bare metal. And so they can make use of the Ironic service to provision some workloads straight onto bare metal machines and get full performance, take advantage of specific hardware. They may bring in containers. And one of the patterns with containers is when you're first starting out with containers, when you're not sure about how an application is going to perform or the kind of isolation it needs, you may run them inside of a virtual machine to use the hypervisor to provide that isolation. But over time, you may want the kind of ultimate performance and the ultimate density out of it, and so you put those containers directly on bare metal. And OpenStack is really the only platform that supports all of these technologies and all of these deployment methodologies, and that is why I think it's so valuable and so exciting to people. Alan Waite is an analyst at Gartner, and they had a conference a couple weeks ago in San Diego that I was at, and he said that he thought that OpenStack was the best candidate for a cross-platform API in the data center to take on all these technologies. And he's also he's very into OpenStack, so he knows where the issues are and the pitfalls. But he thinks going forward, like this is a huge opportunity and potential for us. And the thing that's great about it, that we always talk about, is you can get this in so many different form factors. You can get this in a public cloud, paying by the hour, or you can get it in a private cloud that's customized to your workload, where you can get 5 to 10x the capacity for the same price. And it's all OpenStack powered, all making use of the same APIs and the same code. So one last thing that I wanted to mention, the reason that you build out this kind of infrastructure is ultimately to run applications on top of it, and a lot of times to build software on top of it. And we actually just launched this morning a new application developer section on our website, and it's got a bunch of content in there to help app developers make better use of OpenStack clouds, API documentation, different white papers. We actually have a white paper here this week that we're going to be handing out that is pretty long about containers in OpenStack. It was put together with the help of a lot of different members of the community, and so we're going to have copies of those here. So definitely check out this new section, check out the container white paper, and after this event, as Alex said, this is kind of midway between the summits. We're getting the community together in Tokyo in October. Hopefully some of you guys will be there. It's going to be a great event. It's a little bit of a smaller venue than we had in Vancouver, so don't wait until the last minute to register and book hotels, or you might be sad when you arrive in Tokyo. Following that, if the Tokyo trip is too far, we're going to be in Austin, Texas at the end of April next year. And that's going to be a fun event to go back to. We kicked all of this off in Austin in 2010, going back there. We had 75 then, and we'll have at least 100 times that next year. So it's going to be cool to see how that works. And then at the end of next year in Barcelona, Spain. So, yes. Somebody likes Spain. So thank you guys very much for coming today and for being part of the community. And I hope that you guys really get a lot out of the next 2 days and have a good time.